Hey guys, my name is JC and today we are going to learn all about glucose, insulin, type 1, type 2 diabetes along with insulin resistance. Okay, so let's get started. One of the most important things that you need to understand is that glucose is the primary fuel in your body, and that's why your body maintains a very tight range of 90 to 110 mg per dl. And anytime this range is exceeded, the body has mechanisms to get back to this range. Okay, I'll explain these mechanisms, but let me first draw a blood vessel. Okay, so assume that this is a blood vessel, and let's assume that these are the cells. Okay, so you have like different cells and you have blood vessels, and let's assume you consumed a certain amount of carbohydrates. Doesn't matter whether it's simple or complex carbohydrates, because at the end of the day it's going to get converted into glucose. So let me just draw these glucose molecules in the bloodstream, and let's assume that the blood flow is going this way. Okay, so this is your glucose. Now the problem is that glucose cannot go inside the cells directly, because glucose are large molecules. And so what happens is that your body has a mechanism. So you have a gland called pancreas. Okay, and the pancreas releases something called as insulin. Okay, so I'm gonna draw insulin here by the green color molecules. Let's assume that this is insulin. Okay, so this is insulin, and on the surface of the cell you have something called as insulin receptors. And so what happens is that when the insulin binds to the receptors, okay, so assume that this insulin is bound to the receptor. As insulin is bound to the receptors, you have a key signaling molecule which we call as the IR1, or the insulin receptor substrate 1, and this is a key signaling molecule. And what happens is the key signaling molecule basically signals something what we refer to as GLUT4 translocation. So inside the cells you have vesicles, so they're like tiny straws on top of it, and that's why it's referred to as GLUT4 or glucose 4 transporters. Yeah, so when the insulin binds to its insulin receptors on the surface of the cell, there's the IRS protein which expresses itself, and after the expression it kind of signals these GLUT4 transporters to come to the surface of the cell. So when the translocation happens, you'd see something like this. Okay, you'd see these straws, and with the help of these GLUT4 transporters, glucose is able to penetrate inside the cells. Okay, now what happens in case of insulin resistance? Okay, in case of insulin resistance, the insulin is not able to bind to the surface of the cell. The cell receptors are somehow not able to bind to the insulin. Okay, and this happens in case of excess amount of free fatty acids. So let me draw some free fatty acids which can cause systemic level inflammation. It can mess with signaling of IRS1, and because of that the insulin is not able to bind to the insulin receptors on the surface of the cell. So when insulin is not able to bind to the receptors on the surface of the cell, it results in glucose staying outside. It's not able to come in, and this condition is referred to as insulin resistance. And when insulin resistance is not addressed, this then become type 2 diabetes. Okay, now what happens in case of type 1 diabetes? Well, pancreas does not release insulin, and when there's no insulin, the glucose cannot go inside the cell, leading to a condition called as hyperglycemia, which is pretty dangerous. And that's why type 1 diabetics need to take exogenous insulin, right? And when you take exogenous insulin, it binds to the receptors of the cell, and the glucose is able to go inside the cell, right? So that's referred to as type 1 diabetes. When you have no insulin, type 1 diabetes. And when you have insulin, but the receptors are not working properly, receptors not working is when you get into the state of insulin resistance and you get into the state of type 2 diabetes, right? Interesting thing is that this GLUT4 translocation also happens with the help of exercise. So what we saw here, this is referred to as insulin mediated GLUT4 translocation, and when you exercise, it can also cause GLUT4 to come on the surface of the cell and trap glucose, right? So this is referred to as exercise mediated GLUT4, sorry for my bad handwriting, translocation. It's referred to as translocation because the location of these GLUT4 vesicles is changing. They're going from the inside of the cell to the surface of the cell, poking straws out so that glucose can come in. I hope after this video, you won't have any more doubts about how glucose is absorbed in the cells. Thank you so much.